This video is an audio recording of our reading group reading and discussing on the correct handling of contradictions among the people, Chapter 8, on Let 100 Flowers Blossom, Let 100 Schools of Thought Contend, and Long-Term Coexistence and Mutual Supervision. Our reading groups are open to the public, and we encourage discussion of any ideas people bring to the table, but this also means some of the ideas expressed in this discussion might not reflect the actual views of our party on any level. With that said, we hope you enjoy our reading and discussion of Chapter 8 on Let 100 Flowers Blossom, Let 100 Schools of Thought Contend, and Long-Term Coexistence and Mutual Supervision.
Who would like to read this chapter?
I can take a turn. On Let 100 Flowers Blossom, Let 100 Schools of Thought Contend, and Long-Term Coexistence and Mutual Supervision. Let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend, and long-term coexistence and mutual supervision. How did these slogans come to be put forward? They were put forward in the light of China's specific conditions, in recognition of the continued existence of various kinds of contradictions in socialist society, and in response to the country's urgent need to speed up its economic and cultural development. Letting 100 flowers blossom and 100 schools of thought contend is the policy for promoting progress in the arts and sciences and a flourishing socialist culture in our land. Different forms and styles in art should develop freely, and different schools in science should contend freely. We think that it is harmful to the growth of art and science if administrative measures are used to impose one particular style of art or school of thought and to ban another. Questions of right and wrong in the arts and sciences should be settled through free discussion in artistic and scientific circles, and through practical work in these fields. They should not be settled in an oversimple manner. A period of trial is often needed to determine whether something is right or wrong. Throughout history, at the outset, new and correct things often failed to win recognition from the majority of people, and had to develop by twists and turns through struggle. Often, correct and good things were first regarded not as fragrant flowers, but as poisonous weeds. Copernicus' theory of the solar system and Darwin's theory of evolution were once dismissed as erroneous and had to win out over bitter opposition. Chinese history offers many similar examples. In a socialist society, the conditions for the growth of the new are radically different from and far superior to those in the old society. Nevertheless, it often happens that new rising forces are held back and sound ideas stifled. Besides, even in the absence of their deliberate suppression, the growth of new things may be hindered simply through lack of discernment. It is therefore necessary to be careful about questions of right and wrong in the arts and sciences, to encourage free discussion and avoid hasty conclusions. We believe that such an attitude will help ensure a relatively smooth development of the arts and sciences. Marxism, too, has developed through struggle. At the beginning, Marxism was subjected to all kinds of attack and regarded as a poisonous weed. This is still the case in many parts of the world. In the socialist countries, it enjoys a different position, but non-Marxist and, what is more, anti-Marxist ideologies exist even in these countries. In China, although socialist transformation has in the main been completed as regards the system of ownership, and although the large-scale turbulent class struggles of the masses characteristic of times of revolution have in the main come to an end, there are still remnants of the overthrown landlord and comprador classes. There is still a bourgeoisie, and the remolding of the petty bourgeoisie has only just started.
Quick note, the compradors are people employed by foreign imperialists to carry out business within the country.
Are they like the ethnically Chinese, like kind of like the British
Yeah.
use like Indian upper class to?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Class struggle is by no means over. The class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the class struggle between the various political forces, and the class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie in the ideological field will still be protracted and tortuous, and at times even very sharp. The proletariat seeks to transform the world according to its own world outlook, and so does the bourgeoisie. In this respect, the question of which will win out, socialism or capitalism, is not really settled yet. Marxists remain a minority among the entire population, as well as among the intellectuals. Therefore, Marxism must continue to develop through the struggle. Marxism can develop only through the struggle, and this is not only true of the past and the present, it is necessarily true of the future as well. What is correct invariably develops in the course of struggle with what is wrong. The true, the good, and the beautiful always exist by contrast with the false, the evil, and the ugly, and grow in struggle with them. As soon as something erroneous is rejected and a particular truth accepted by mankind, new truths begin to struggle with new errors. Such struggles will never end. This is the law of development of truth and naturally of Marxism.
Do you want someone to pick it up, or do you want to continue?
Yeah, someone else can grab it if someone else is down.
Okay. I can read. It will take a fairly long period of time to decide the issue in the ideological struggle between socialism and capitalism in our country. The reason is that the influence of the bourgeoisie and of the intellectuals who come from the old society, the very influence which constitutes their class ideology, will persist in our country for a long time. If this is not understood at all, or is insufficiently understood, the gravest mistakes will be made and the necessity of waging struggle in the ideological field will be ignored. Ideological struggle differs from other forms of struggle, since the only method used is painstaking reasoning, and not crude coercion. Today, socialism is in an advantageous position in the ideological struggle. The basic power of the state is in the hands of the working people led by the proletariat. The Communist Party is strong and its prestige high. Although there are defects and mistakes in our work, every fair-minded person can see that we are loyal to the people, that we are both determined and able to build up our motherland together with them, and that we have already achieved great successes and will achieve still greater ones. The vast majority of the bourgeoisie and the intellectuals who come from the old society are patriotic and are willing to serve their flourishing socialist motherland. They know they will have nothing to fall back on, and their future cannot possibly be bright if they turn away from the socialist cause and from the working people led by the Communist Party. People may ask, since Marxism is accepted as the guiding ideology by the majority of the people in our country, can it be criticized? Certainly it can. Marxism is scientific truth and fears no criticism. If it did, and if it could be overthrown by criticism, it would be worthless. In fact, aren't the idealists criticizing Marxism every day and in every way? And those who harbor bourgeois and petty bourgeois ideas and do not wish to change, aren't they also criticizing Marxism in every way? Marxists should not be afraid of criticism from any quarter. Quite the contrary, they need to temper and develop themselves and win new positions in the teeth of criticism and in the storm and stress of struggle. Fighting against wrong ideas is like being vaccinated. A man develops greater immunity from disease as a result of vaccination. Plants raised in hothouses are unlikely to be hardy. Carrying out the policy of letting 100 flowers blossom and 100 schools of thought contend will not weaken, but strengthen the leading position of Marxism in the ideological field. What should our policy be towards non-Marxist ideas? As far as unmistakable counter-revolutionaries and saboteurs of the socialist cause are concerned, the matter is easy. We simply deprive them of their freedom of speech. But incorrect ideas among the people are quite a different matter. Will it do to ban such ideas and deny them any opportunity for expression? Certainly not. It is not only futile, but very harmful to use crude methods in dealing with ideological questions among the people, with questions about man's mental world. You may ban the expression of wrong ideas, but the ideas will still be there. On the other hand, if correct ideas are pampered in hothouses and never exposed to the elements and immunized against diseases, they will not win out against erroneous ones. Therefore, it is only by employing the method of discussion, criticism, and reasoning that we can really foster correct ideas and overcome wrong ones, and that we can really settle issues. It is inevitable that the bourgeoisie and petty bourgeoisie will give expression to their own ideologies. It is inevitable that they will stubbornly assert themselves on political and ideological questions by every possible means. You cannot expect them to do otherwise. We should not use the method of suppression and prevent them from expressing themselves, but should allow them to do so and at the same time argue with them and direct appropriate criticism at them. Undoubtedly, we must criticize wrong ideas of every description. It certainly would not be right to refrain from criticism. look on while wrong ideas spread unchecked, and allow them to dominate the field. Mistakes must be criticized and poisonous weeds fought wherever they crop up. However, such criticism should not be dogmatic, and the metaphysical method should not be used, but instead the effort should be made to apply the dialectical method. What is needed is scientific analysis and convincing argument. Dogmatic criticism settles nothing. We are against poisonous weeds of whatever kind, but Eve must carefully distinguish between what is really a poisonous weed and what is really a fragrant flower. Together with the masses of the people, we must learn to differentiate carefully between the two and use correct methods to fight poisonous weeds. At the same time we criticize dogmatism, we must direct our attention to criticizing revisionism. Revisionism, or right opportunism, is a bourgeois trend of thought that is even more dangerous than dogmatism. The revisionists, the right opportunists, pay lip service to Marxism. They too attack dogmatism, but what they are really attacking is the quintessence of Marxism. They oppose or distort materialism and dialectics, oppose or try to weaken the people's democratic dictatorship and the leading role of the Communist Party, and oppose or try to weaken socialist transformation and socialist construction. Even after the basic victory of our socialist revolution, there will still be a number of people in our society who vainly hope to restore the capitalist system and are sure to fight the working class on every front, including the ideological one. And their right-hand men in this struggle are the revisionists. We're going to take a break from the reading for a sec to have a multi-part discussion question. Questions that we're going to be discussing in this multi-part discussion, whatever, is what does the phrase, let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend mean? Why is it beneficial to socialist construction? What might endanger and threaten the effectiveness of this practice, and how do we counter these threats? And how do we apply all of this to our current situation in Milwaukee? So, beginning, what does the phrase, let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend mean?
I take this to mean allowing a wide berth for different ways of expressing oneself artistically, different scientific ideas, and then kind of allowing those to compete in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, pretty much got that perfect. Let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend means allowing all the various ideas people have to contend with each other in the marketplace of ideas, as you said. The ideas that are more correct and more accurate, given equal and fair consideration, should inevitably win out over the less correct ideas. Why is this practice beneficial to socialist construction?
You want the ideas that are more correct and accurate to win out, because those are the ones that are going to benefit the society the most.
I think it also taps into the potential of the masses, under capitalism. There's the meme or the whatever about, how many Einsteins have we not had, because we've had so many people around the world who have been, condemned to a life of material privation and exploitation. Letting all the ideas come out and empowering everyone to express themselves is an important first step, I think, in empowering people to tap into their own potential, not only for the benefit of society at large, but to kind of, for lack of a better term, help them mature, help them grow as individuals.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it would help curb resentment as well. Like if you have somebody who is, I don't know, like bourgeois or petty bourgeois or something, as long as they're not, actively working against the socialist state, they can complain about it, they can talk about it, they can talk about their own ideas, they can be liberal if they want to. They can't accuse the state of like denying them freedoms or whatever.
Yeah, I think you all so far have gotten pretty much what I said, plus even a bit more. What I said was this is beneficial to the socialist construction because Marxism is by nature scientific and the most beneficial to the most people. It will therefore naturally win out over competing ideas, and in the process, the masses will learn why socialism is the most beneficial to them, and socialism will be able to be inoculated against the competing ideas, know how to best annihilate them in the marketplace of ideas. Before those competing ideas can reach the point of threatening the socialist system. Encouraging this discussion makes sure to weed out both dogmatism or left opportunism and revisionism or right opportunism. Anything else on this before we move on to what might threaten it?
We can carry on the tradition of destroying liberals in the marketplace of ideas,
Yes.
except from the actual correct point of view.
All right. So this next question, what might endanger and threaten the effectiveness of this practice and how do we counter these threats, is more of a kind of exploratory. It's not covered, not even touched upon in the chapter. What might everyone here identify as potential threats to the effectiveness of this practice, and how would we go about preventing them from threatening the effectiveness of the practice?
The first thing that pops in my mind is just the whole paradox of tolerance almost. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, but the notion that like a society that is so tolerant that it tolerates intolerance is not a tolerant society because it's going to be destroyed and replaced with an intolerant one because the intolerant are going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, like maybe debating race science or something. Like so-called race science is not.
Yeah, I don't think that is something that it falls into the purview of the 100 schools of thought that are able to contend. I think that's
Well, right. Like that's something that you
Yeah.
don't like. No, we don't need to.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be debating these things.
Yeah, true. Like, I guess we should be making sure that we are very clear what is acceptable for one of the schools of thought that can contend.
Yeah, to use a wonky poli-sci term, if we had a dictatorship of the proletariat, we could more easily control the Overton window. This idea that there is at any given point limits to what is considered to be acceptable or practical in the sphere of public debate and public interaction. Like right now, the Overton window, well, for decades, the Overton window was so far to the right that communism and socialism were liable to get you fired or arrested or beat up or whatever. So, I guess in the simplest way possible, like if we could move the Overton window so far to the right that anyone espousing fascist or monarchist or capitalist ideology would just be rightly considered a nut job. Like, yeah, that's not happening.
Like
you can
saying,
say
let's
it.
do feudalism again.
Right, exactly. It's like, you know what? You can say it, but like we're not going to arrest you unless you actually try to enact those ideas. If you start acting in those ways, that's bad. But
Yeah.
fine, you can say it, and everyone's going to think you're crazy. But whatever. I was going to say what might endanger and threaten. A lot of this is talking about ideology, but we're materialists, and I would say a lot of left projects and left ideas have been undermined by very poor material circumstances. And I think it can be accurately and fairly argued that in a lot of those instances, they weren't the faults of the communists, like after civil wars and right after revolutions and the end of world wars and whatever else.
Make the economy scream.
Like that, but also, like if the communists come to power and they're like, okay, well, we have to rebuild a nation of, 600 million people and 90% of us are peasants and we don't have any, economic, no industrial base to speak of. Like this is going to take a minute, but then 3 months later, everyone's like, oh, we still aren't living in a socialist utopia. Like this idea that like socialism and communism is going to immediately bring everyone up to a higher level, where the truth is it just takes time to build that stuff up, and you have to be very deliberate and it has to be very well planned. And 100 flowers bloom, 100 schools of thought contend is a fantastic way of building that and gaining momentum and getting everyone pushing in relatively the same direction. But if the Smiths and the Joneses don't have bread on their table, they're not really going to care about that. Like they need. So
I would actually argue that the problem that you're talking about, the policy of let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend, is actually a solution for that problem, just because if we look at Cuba, their conditions are absolute shit, like thanks to the American blockade. But because their people discuss and have conversations with each other, and the government is very involved in people's lives and makes sure to manage things so that everyone's needs are met as adequately as they can. And when they can't be, the government is very open and a very open book and lets people know exactly what is going on. And because of that, the people of Cuba are very supportive of their government despite the material conditions there.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I was thinking more like in the early stages. I mean, Cuba, even though the blockade's been in place since 1960, for 30 years after that, they had the Soviet Union basically, because the Soviet Union was the only state in the world strong enough to flout the blockade. So the Soviet Union was still able to like get their economy at least a little bit up and running. But say there had been no Soviet Union, like, I don't know. I just know that if you don't already have the ideological framework to properly interpret your material reality, the default when you're in a really tough material situation is just going to be to like lash out and like, fine, like we see in American politics all the time. It's whoever says the right thing and names the right group as the bad people, whether that's immigrants or billionaires or whoever, and promises even just a modicum of material improvement for large sections of the population, a lot of voters will immediately follow that, and a lot of voters don't. But if the question is what might endanger and threaten the effectiveness of 100 flowers blossom policy, I would posit that prolonged negative, difficult material circumstances can be a threat to that. Not that it will topple it. I think Cuba is a great example that you brought up, but that could endanger the entire project if, whether it's through external pressures or sabotage or blockades or whatever, if the material conditions don't improve, that can threaten the entire project.
If we think about like Eastern Europe, though, as their material conditions were not so great, at least compared to what they saw in the West during like the 80s, they did not have a policy of let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend. People didn't know what was going on with their own economy. There wasn't these discussions. Even their own politicians, frankly, didn't even know what was going on. And having those discussions, having a policy of let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend, could have very much, maybe even prevented some of them or even all of them from collapsing as they did.
Yeah, I think that's I think that you're probably right. The only thing I would point out is that well, you know what? I don't want to get too lost in the weeds. I think generally you're correct.
I guess,
yeah.
To your point, material conditions could necessitate that we couldn't have this policy in place for a certain period of time. For example, in the middle of like a revolution or civil war in which there's a struggle for power and we don't have time to be having these discussions. It's like,
Yeah, or even that the discussions themselves could be dangerous only in the sense of it lets bad faith actors, it like leaves, it creates cracks in the facade of the movement or the revolution, and the enemies will exploit that. That's kind of what I was going to get into. I didn't want to get too far into the weeds, but like
let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend is very much a long-term policy that has its effects in the long term. So if you don't have that time to be doing the long term, or if putting it in place means you might not get to that long term, then we couldn't put it in place at the moment.
To me, that kind of sounds like desperate times call for desperate measures. And I think that makes sense. I think that what Daniel was saying about that made total sense. Like I know it's kind of like a buzzword, but we shouldn't necessarily deny that there was a degree of authoritarianism present at the inception of a lot of communist countries, because that was needed. That was necessary. And I think, like in the Soviet Union, maybe something did go wrong. Maybe something happened very early on that we haven't considered, or we don't know about, or we don't understand, that effed it up. But I don't know. Most people seem to think it's Khrushchev.
I guess one threat that I identified is that this practice can be endangered by purposely falsified information, because false information can obscure reality, making it impossible to come to the correct scientific solution without first discerning said falsehood. I guess this is a fairly easy one to identify how we counter it, but any ideas on how we might counter that?
You could probably just do like basic regulations of like AI is a thing now, if you post like an AI video or something, like if you have to put like a stamp on it or something, like labeling it as AI. Like this is not real.
Disclaimer, maybe bullshit inside.
Right.
What I had here is that this can be prevented by establishing methods of rigorous and thorough fact-checking. The second example I had was that this can also be endangered if the people refuse to take a scientific approach when reality is perceived as being inconvenient for the vast majority of people. For example, if the majority of the people want to exterminate all the sparrows that are suspected of eating a small fraction of grain stores, but ecologists and ornithologists try to warn that sparrows are a keystone species and eliminating them could cause environmental catastrophe, the people might not listen to the scientists or even actively silence them by force. How do we prevent that?
Listen to them.
Vaccine mandates.
Vaccine mandates, okay, yeah.
It was a chick, but
I mean,
put that sign in your window. In this house, we believe in science.
yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think the peasants came up with the sparrow thing.
It was definitely Mao.
Yeah. I mean, Mao kind of like came up with it, but like the peasants got really into it.
Oh yeah, they were like storming the.
Yeah, and like it was also like party cadres like just going out and spontaneously silencing any scientists that spoke out.
And birds.
And birds.
Any birds that spoke out.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think on the top level, on like the surface level, superficially, killing all the sparrows is very extreme, but makes sense if you're like, I mean, because the reasons are so flawed, it was not a good idea, but I mean, those fuckers are always by the grain, they're always pecking at the grain, they're always in the grain fields, like, It makes sense initially.
I mean, sure.
I mean, if you have no knowledge of ecology or no critical thinking,
right,
skills,
which is why this can be a danger to the system of let 100 flowers blossom, let 100 schools of thought contend.
Yeah, maybe make sure that your education system is up to snuff.
Yes.
Although I want to add, I think this is important, or not important, but just interesting, that after the For Pests campaign, Mao imported like thousands of sparrows from the Soviet Union in an attempt to repair the ecosystems.
Yeah, it's crazy how successful they were in their extermination of sparrows in all of China, though.
Literally.
So is this a widely known thing? I didn't know about the sparrows.
Yeah, that's
pretty well known.
Yeah, that's a big part of the Great Leap Forward, which began a year after this book was written.
Hell yeah, classic Mao.
So clearly, bro needed to read his own works.
Yes, he did. I guess what I said for how we can prevent this is that this can be prevented by allowing trained professionals in a given field to discuss things relevant to their field amongst themselves first. Come to a consensus, then promote the consensus made by those professionals and explain the reasoning and implications. In our example, listening to the scientists, then promoting and explaining their consensus to the people that exterminating all the sparrows would result in ecological catastrophe, that would then result in the loss of far, far more grain than even the fattest sparrows could ever steal, would have been the correct course of action. Intellectuals should be made a third pillar of socialist society in addition to the proletariat and peasants. Thank you, Comrade Kim Il-sung.
I mean, how do we know the scientists in China didn't try exactly that and they were still turned down?
Oh, the scientists tried. I'm talking about from the perspective of the Communist Party, like what we should be doing.
Oh, yeah, I wonder, where did Mao get that idea? Is that just like peasant brain stuff? I mean,
I don't know.
Well, I mean, parts of four pests make sense. You know, you got exterminate your flies, your rats, your mosquitoes. Flies are associated with poop. Mosquitoes carry malaria. Rats carry plague.
There could have been more research put into it first.
Well, yeah.
Especially
But-
when you're like talking about something as ecological as exterminating an entire species from an area.
Okay, but they didn't go extinct.
I mean,
they did.
in China.
In China, they literally did.
Yeah, they had to import new sparrows.
Yeah.
Like none were left.
Yes,
mean-
literally none.
I don't know about literally none, but
Literally none. Like
Bro.
the Chinese sparrow does not exist anymore.
Nice.
Yeah. So how do we apply all of this to our current situation in Milwaukee?
Do you mean citywide or club-wide? Or a third way?
Yeah, like for our party, just in general, our own activities and what lessons we should take from this as we go forward in our own actions.
I mean, I guess if two comrades have a disagreement or something, maybe they could bring other people in to see what they think,
Sure.
add
Yeah.
their thoughts to it, and
Yeah, that's a good
go on
idea.
from there.
Yeah. Just plain and simple, what would applying the Let 100 Flowers Blossom, Let 100 Schools of Thought Contend look like if we applied it within our own party?
Unless there's something going on that I don't know about, I would say we kind of already do that. Like,
I mean, yes.
people are very free to say pretty much whatever they want to say within reason. In the group chat, hold on a second.
Well, just to be clear, our group chat has the rule criticism can't not be made in the group chat. Criticism should be reserved for the proper time and place in which we are having criticism discussion.
I mean, it doesn't have to be just criticism. It can just be like if we're talking about some socialist state or something.
Yeah.
And somebody disagrees with somebody else about
Yes.
whatever. Like, we don't need to scream at each other to
Mhm.
like, you're wrong, and just like, I don't know, just hardcore debate lord them.
Mhm.
But you know, we can talk it out. And
I guess, Daniel, you did mention that we're kind of already doing it. And yes, on the local level, we have tried to make sure that we implement this as much as we can. But just in general, what are we doing that is part of that, and what does that look like?
like specific examples that we've done, or
I
that
guess
could
kind of
happen?
just in general, like broadly.
I, for one, love birds.
Birds are great.
Me too.
Yeah, I
They're
just
kind of
wanted
scary,
to- Yeah, I love birds.
Mhm.
So there's that blossoming.
That is something that we definitely should apply here.
well, that's true. There's some people who hate birds.
One vote against killing the birds.
Yeah, for real.
I guess I was just saying we should allow and encourage debate and discussion within our party at the appropriate time and in the appropriate setting as a way to ensure the decisions our leadership takes are understood by our membership and to ensure our leadership always puts in the effort to make as informed decisions as possible so that those decisions can actually hold up under such a discussion. This is like talking about our own party policy. Like, we've tried to make sure that we have discussions on party policy, both local policy, state policy, and then also national policy as well. We've had discussions here to understand why the policy is what it is. And having these discussions and knowing that these discussions are going to be had, make sure that when we make decisions, make policies, and whatever we decide to do, we aren't just doing it offhand. We have a reason why we're doing it, and we are able to explain that reason to people.
It's just don't be dogmatic
Yes.
and just allow for criticism in general.
And then when we're engaging with the public,
Yeah, I'm just thinking don't browbeat people into agreeing with you, because I mean, a
Mhm.
lot of the time they're just not going to. They've been growing up in growing up and living in American society. They're likely
Yeah.
not going to. So, you know, gently, perhaps, maybe try showing them where they might be wrong, and like it's a long process, and if they don't agree with you right away, it's okay. You can try again.
That is a fantastic idea, because I think so many Americans, like, political perspectives are just kind of shaped around like how they're told to see people in the news or how they read to see people in the news, right? So most of the time, I think most Americans' political interactions are with people who are close to them, but when it's not, they have these preconceived notions. And I think what Lily was saying, kind of how we don't want to berate them, we don't want to play into those preconceived notions. We don't want them to think that we're the crazy people they hear about on the news. And that's not to say that they should listen to the news, but I mean, if we appeal to that, we might better be able to help them understand that, like, we are not like the others. We're not, as people say we are. We have your interest in mind.
Yeah, I mean, you both covered it way more in detail than I did in what I had here. I just said we should make sure to engage in discussions with those that don't share our views to make sure we know how to defend and explain Marxism. But what you both said was perfect.
I just want to add one thing. I think when you talk to people, I think utilizing unity, criticism, unity when you're talking to just random people also works, because it shows them that you do value what they're saying, even if they don't agree, or even if you don't agree with them.
Yeah.
Or if they have a good point that is correct in just the sea of what's wrong, you can point that out and be like, yeah, you're right about that. However, think about it like this. So
it also shows that you're thinking about what they're saying too.
Right, you're trying to engage and show them that you are engaging with what they're saying.
Yeah.
And actually engage with what they're saying.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? All right, that was a long discussion question, but we can get back to the text now. Is there anyone that would like to volunteer to read?
I will.
All right.
Okay. Literally the two slogans, let 100 flowers blossom and let 100 schools of thought contend, have no class character. The proletariat can turn them to account, and so can the bourgeoisie or others. Different classes, strata, and social groups each have their own views on what are fragrant flowers and what are poisonous weeds. Then, from the point of view of the masses, what should be the criteria today for distinguishing fragrant flowers from poisonous weeds? In their political activities, how should our people judge whether a person's words and deeds are right or wrong? On the basis of the principles of our Constitution, the will of the overwhelming majority of our people, and the common political positions which have been proclaimed on various occasions by our political parties, we consider that, broadly speaking, the criteria should be as follows. Number 1, words and deeds should help to unite and not divide the people of all our nationalities. Number 2, they should be beneficial and not harmful to socialist transformation and socialist construction. Number 3, they should help to consolidate and not undermine or weaken the people's democratic dictatorship. Number 4, they should help to consolidate and not undermine or weaken democratic centralism. Number 5, they should help to strengthen and not shake off or weaken the leadership of the Communist Party. And finally, number 6, they should be beneficial and not harmful to international socialist unity and the unity of the peace-loving people of the world. Of these 6 criteria, the most important are the 2 about the socialist path and the leadership of the party. These criteria are put forward not to hinder, but to foster the free discussion of questions among the people. Those who disapprove these criteria can still state their own views and argue their case. However, so long as the majority of the people have clear-cut criteria to go by, criticism and self-criticism can be conducted along proper lines, and these criteria can be applied to people's words and deeds to determine whether they are right or wrong, whether they're fragrant flowers or poisonous weeds. These are political criteria. Naturally, to judge the validity of scientific theories or assess the aesthetic value of works of art, other relevant criteria are needed. But these 6 political criteria are applicable to all activities in the arts and sciences. In a socialist country like ours, can there possibly be any useful scientific or artistic activity which runs counter to these political criteria? The views set out above are based on China's specific historical conditions. Conditions vary in different socialist countries and with different communist parties. Therefore, we do not maintain that they should or must adopt the Chinese way. The slogan long-term coexistence and mutual supervision is also a product of China's specific historical conditions. It was not put forward all of a sudden, but had been in the making for several years. The idea of long-term coexistence had been there for a long time. When the socialist system was in the main established last year, the slogan was formulated in explicit terms. Why should the bourgeois and petty bourgeois democratic parties be allowed to exist side by side with the party of the working class over a long period of time? Because we have no reason for not adopting the policy of long-term coexistence with all those political parties which are truly devoted to the task of uniting the people for the cause of socialism and which enjoy the trust of the people. As early as June of 1950, at the second session of the First National Committee of the Political Consultative Conference, I put the matter in this way. The people and their government have no reason to reject anyone or deny him the opportunity of making a living and rendering service to the country, provided he is really willing to serve the people and provided he really helped and did a good turn when the people were faced with difficulties and keeps on doing good without giving up halfway. What I was discussing here was the political basis for the long-term coexistence of the various parties. It is the desire as well as the policy of the Communist Party to exist side by side with the Democratic parties for a long time to come. But whether the Democratic parties can long remain in existence depends not merely on the desire of the Communist Party, but on how well they acquit themselves and on whether they enjoy the trust of the people. Mutual supervision among the various parties is also a long established fact, in the sense that they have long been advising and criticizing each other. Mutual supervision is obviously not a one-sided matter. It means that the Communist Party can exercise supervision over the Democratic parties, and vice versa. Why should the Democratic parties be allowed to exercise supervision over the Communist Party? Because a party, as much as an individual, has great need to hear opinions different from its own. We all know that supervision over the Communist Party is mainly exercised by the working people and the party membership. But it augments that benefit to us to have supervision by the Democratic parties too. Of course, the advice and criticism exchanged by the Communist Party and the Democratic parties will play a positive supervisory role only when they conform to the 6 political criteria given above. Thus, we hope that in order to fit in with the needs of the new society, all the Democratic parties will pay attention to ideological remolding and strive for long-term coexistence with the Communist Party and mutual supervision.
All right, thank you very much for reading. So going back to those 6 criteria that Mao presents, what do we think of the 6 criteria Mao presents for determining if a person's words or deeds are right or wrong? Why were they needed in the conditions the CPC found itself in? And I don't have any answers down for the what do we think of the 6 criteria. I just want to hear what all of you think. And then you can also give why you think each one was needed.
I think that they're generally very helpful kind of guideposts. I don't think it's an exhaustive list. Mao didn't think it was an exhaustive list. He said, hey, there might be other stuff happening in other countries at other times. I think it's helpful to have such a list, or at least the ability to express some of these ideas here, because, one of the challenges that we might face today, or say if we were to affect a revolution tomorrow, would be the charge of, authoritarianism, but also of stifling discussion, and authoritarian means anti-democratic, et cetera, and explaining that, well, every system has its own kind of criteria for how to determine what is correct or what is permissible. Under capitalism, it's, well, does it help us accumulate more private profit and expand the circulation of capital? Then it's permissible. But a list like this would demonstrate that, yes, while communists recognize that we have to have limits on what is permissible in the conversation, to me, this list at least speaks to the good faith of communist efforts to do that. right? It's not about, oh, well, does it harm the leader? It's all about, does this help the group in the short term and the long term? And that, I think, is a more kind of noble way to limit the public discourse.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on these?
I mean, these also aren't like laws.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they're enforced. Like, if you break rule number 3, then police come and arrest you or something.
Yeah. Of course, when we get into the long-term coexistence and mutual supervision, they are things that the parties need to follow. But
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
yes.
I think this system that Mao has established here, this 6-point system, is great because it's simple and it's clear and understandable to most people, I would think. It can greatly be augmented by like scientific theories of hypothesizing and theorizing.
I would agree with that.
Like in an experiment, it doesn't matter if you conduct that experiment once, the results are not as important as they would be if you conducted that experiment 3 times. And the more you conduct that experiment, the more reliable the results of it are. You have to have at least like 3 different trials so you can really understand the errors in the results. Like
Mhm.
if you do something once and it works that one time, that does not mean it will work again.
Mhm.
And I think general, maybe even Western scientific attitude, not to be imperialist, might in some ways be beneficial to how we use this and understand this and propagate the idea of this.
Mhm. What about the first criteria? Why was the first criteria needed in conditions the CPC found itself in?
I mean, China's a very multi-ethnic country. You know, we don't
Mhm.
want to be stoking racial or ethnic divisions. And especially like, I mean, China's very multi-ethnic, but it's also Han majority.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you definitely don't want Han people
Definitely.
starting to agitate against people of other ethnicities.
Yep. I said China has always been a multicultural nation and depends on the cooperation between all the nations of China. Further, to unify people across national boundaries, we must eliminate chauvinism and ensure one is not placed above another. What about for criteria 2? They should be beneficial and not harmful to socialist transformation and socialist construction.
You know, building socialism requires the masses all pushing in one direction. If you've got people trying to drag back to, you know, capitalism or imperialism or something like that, the whole project's going to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. I said socialist transformation and construction is the collective efforts of the vast majority of society to improve their conditions and the conditions of their fellow people. However, it is necessary to make sure that we maintain a scientific understanding of what is beneficial to socialist transformation and what is not, to avoid left opportunism. What about for criteria 3? They should help to consolidate and not undermine or weaken the people's democratic dictatorship.
I think for this point, we could have a really simple, clear-cut system, wherein after somebody presents an idea or a thought or anything of that, you can see if it has usable results. You consider, will this lead to division? I mean, like, I know this is kind of implied, but I mean, like, really, so you can determine whether or not that overarching claim can be dismissed or not. And that's not to say you should invalidate that claim, but if you're saying something that fundamentally will not work and is wrong, like kill all of the sparrows, then you need to be told that that's not a good idea. You can't do that. I think to this bullet point 3, we can apply that system into the whole thing. And I know that's what Mao is saying, but I mean that's just how I feel about this point specifically.
Just a reminder, the people's democratic dictatorship refers to it is democracy among the people and dictatorship over the enemies of the people.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so it's just like don't advocate for, you know, a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
Or killing sparrows.
Yeah, or that.
Also, I think it's important to point out that at this point, you know, 1949, early 1950s, or really any socialist project, even though to pull off a successful socialist revolution, you're going to need a critical mass of the population to be actively engaged in socialist and communist revolutionary politics. Critical mass is not the same as majority. It just means enough people to get it to work. So in a situation like for number 3, where you're building a people's democratic dictatorship, there's going to be a lot of people who never really thought about politics before. But now that it looks like if me thinking about it might actually improve my material situation, then sure, I'll engage in politics. But that's really hard when you're doing it for the first couple of times. Like, it takes a lot of trial and error to get good at political analysis and political engagement. And so I think it's important to consolidate and support a people's democratic dictatorship. Otherwise, people get discouraged. They think, oh, well, there's no point in doing this anymore. And then, like I said in the last point, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. What I had was just basically what Lily said earlier, in that the people's democratic dictatorship, a form of the dictatorship of the proletariat, is vital to ensuring the rule of the people and preventing the enemies of the people from taking control of society away from the people. How about criteria 4? They should help to consolidate and not undermine or weaken democratic centralism.
I refer the group to Leon Trotsky.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, unironically, it's like, for anyone watching or listening who does not know, democratic centralism is one of the biggest organizing principles of socialism and communism. The democracy part comes from open and free debate within the party, within the organization, about what needs to be done. Everyone gets to say their piece. Obviously, you set up rules that everyone has to follow to make sure the whole thing stays structured enough to be productive, but everyone gets to say their piece. And then you make a decision. And once that decision has been democratically voted on and a majority decision has been made, everyone within that group, and this is the centralism part, is expected to support that idea. Even if personally you think it's the wrong idea, you are recognizing that, okay, I am part of a group and the group has made this decision. And so if I want to be part of this group, I need to support this decision. And that doesn't mean that there's never any more debate about it. There are typically going to be channels set up for coming back and, okay, we need to open up this discussion again and address people's concerns and all that kind of stuff. But what you can't do is just start declaring splinter factions and start trying to undermine group cohesion because you lost or because you so vehemently disagree with the decision that was made. It's okay to disagree. It's not okay to sacrifice group cohesion and party discipline because you personally do not agree with the decision that was made. And in a nutshell, without going into too much detail, that's where we get the idea of Trotskyism from. So unironically, that's why I think number 0.4 is necessary, because again, I keep saying the whole project will fall apart if you don't follow that idea.
Yep.
I never thought about it, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense that Trotskyists don't follow democratic centralism. That that explains a lot.
Well, they do until like
They do.
there's a big discussion. Well, no, they do until there's a big contentious vote, and then they just splinter because
Yeah.
they,
Does that count?
Well,
If it happens over
fair
and over
point,
and
yeah.
over.
they practice democratic centralism on paper, but not in practice.
Yeah.
So basically what I just said for this criteria is that democratic centralism is a key structural component to any socialist organization. But in China's case, in which multiple parties exist, some of which are bourgeois parties, that's kind of debatable. But there are some that might represent more like petty bourgeois interests. It depends on what you might think of a bourgeois party. There aren't like bourgeois parties in the sense that we might see in the United States, but
It's more of an advisory
right.
thing. Yeah.
Just that the party might be more aligned with representing interests of petty bourgeois or just regular bourgeois interests.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like absolutely ruled over by the bourgeoisie, of course, like the bourgeois parties are in a bourgeois democracy, but like just more aligned with bourgeois interests, but like maybe not necessarily only representing bourgeois interests. Just make that clear. It is absolutely necessary to ensure the people's democratic dictatorship remains the people's democratic dictatorship. This goes hand in hand with promoting the leadership of the Communist Party. So, for point 5, they should help to strengthen and not shake off or weaken the leadership of the Communist Party. Why is that important for China's situation?
Could you say that again?
Criteria 5, they should help to strengthen and not shake off or weaken the leadership of the Communist Party.
Right. I think some people might misconstrue Mao's idea of allowing other parties as him saying another party that isn't communist can take the position of the Communist Party. Like in Weimar Germany. Like
Mhm.
it's not that's not the kind of system he's describing. And like my initial thought when I think of that kind of multi-party system, a democratic centralist communist multi-party system, that's what I think of. I think of like the multi-party parliamentary democracy or whatever that
Yeah.
liberal countries have.
Yeah, that's not the sort of
so-
multi-party system that we have here in China.
Yeah, so
I say that like I'm in China.
One
I
can
just
dream.
wanted to clear up that preconceived notion on my part.
All right, so why was criteria 5 needed?
It's basically just the culmination of 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah,
It just sums up all of those.
pretty much, yeah. I said the leadership of the Communist Party goes hand in hand with maintaining democratic centralism. To maintain the people's democratic dictatorship, all parties must practice democratic centralism with the Communist Party of China at the head in the practice of long-term coexistence and mutual supervision. Finally, criteria 6, they should be beneficial and not harmful to the international socialist unity and unity of the peace-loving people of the world. Why was that needed?
There are so few of them, or there were so few of them at the time anyway. So you got to learn how to play nice.
Yep.
I mean, this was also a time of great strife among the communist parties.
Yeah, I was going to say
was
specifically,
just
I'm
about
looking
to
at
kick
you,
off, like-
Khrushchev.
The USSR removing all of its like agricultural scientists during the Great Leap Forward was like I think one of the first big points of the split.
Yeah.
I just had here first, China at this point was a severely underdeveloped country that was only just getting back on its feet after the century of humiliation and depended on good relations and cooperation with its socialist neighbors to ensure its security. Second, promoting peace and cooperation. While the imperialists only promote war and oppression, will inevitably isolate the imperialists once they begin to lose their ability to bully other nations into submission, as all imperialists eventually will.
That sounds familiar.
Bricks.
I mean, it could happen faster
Yeah.
for us, but you know.
For anyone that wants to look into more of that, just look up really anything that Mao has said on paper tigers.
Mm.
All right. What criteria might fit our own situation? And there are likely many good answers. What I'm going to share once we get to that is only some that we might want to consider.
Are we talking like for our own party or for?
Yeah, like, I mean, say we had a revolution. We're in charge now.
Mm.
What criteria might we use?
These are all good.
Yeah.
I want all of them.
Anything else that we should add? I think Francis mentioned something about scientific stuff earlier.
I was gonna say number 7 in our case. I mean, yeah, the science stuff, but number 7 could be keep the brain rot to an acceptable, humorous minimum. I think a lot of people have trouble with that. 6, 7. Sorry.
Is this about the internet or is this about like?
No, people do it in real life. I saw this video where this female news reporter, I know this is like off topic, but I'm serious. There was this group of guys and one of him was just like screaming 6, 7 at her. It was so disruptive. I mean, we could just send them to the gallows, but
Gulag.
yeah, but you know, that's
Yeah,
unethical.
I mean, also
Gallows in
just-
the gulag.
we should just be fostering like a more collective atmosphere and more collective attitude for people. That'll obviously take some time, but
I mean, if you're being annoying, then you get put in a timeout.
yeah.
I don't mean that like literally go to prison.
Gulag.
I mean just like maybe remove that person.
I think maybe what we could do is like teach people to like heckle anyone that's being stupid like that.
Okay, I guess another thing too is that sort of behavior is really spurred on by social media and wanting to become an influencer and making money off of that and getting famous.
True.
I think, you know, we'll probably need to address it because, socialism is it'd be a transitionary stage, but I think it would lessen that sort of obnoxious behavior. I think would lessen a lot as we transition to socialism and communism.
Yes, speaking of the scientific point, I put as a possible thing that whatever someone says, they should maintain an objective scientific basis to the best of their abilities and not purposely mislead, misinform, or confuse the public.
Yeah, like maybe Mao should have had that one for the sparrows.
I know this kind of is already covered by the very broad point in number 2, to social. It should be beneficial to socialist transformation, but I would either flesh that out or add as a point. It should be helpful to, I guess like the transformation of political minds from, because at least here in the US, it just feels like so many people are not only full of brain rot, but just like they are so stuck in this petty bourgeois individualist mindset that it's going to take a long time to get them to abandon that and adopt a more socialist collectivist kind of mindset. So I would either flesh out to socialist transformation in point 2 or just add in as a point, it must be beneficial to the ideological transformation of the masses.
I kind of did actually have an alternate to number 2 for my second one. They should promote the collective scientific development of all of society.
Oh, can we just pretend I said that?
I said that the second one can be replaced with this because from the Chinese experience with the Great Leap Forward, that showed why it is so important to emphasize scientific development and avoid left opportunism in development. So I think from that experience, this might be a better version of the second criteria. And then also to replace the first criteria for something more conducive to our own situation, I kind of changed it to words and deeds should help unite the people, not create division by inciting hate towards any section of the people. I felt that that was a better change for our own situation because due to our own situation of dealing with the colonizer nation and the colonized, it is better worded to focus on preventing oppressor nation chauvinism, which is far, far more poisonous.
100% agree with that.
Anything else on these 6 criteria quick? All right. What is long-term coexistence and mutual supervision and how does it function? Context, prior to the Chinese Civil War, in the period of the First United Front, the Kuomintang and the CPC existed together in an alliance that in practice was similar to the modern long-term coexistence and mutual supervision. Then, during the Civil War, a number of parties sided with the CPC, including the left Kuomintang, and carried on the socialism of Sun Zhongshan, or also known as Sun Yat-sen, against Jiang Jieshi, also known as Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang. These parties that allied with the CPC and followed its leadership in the Civil War would practice an early version of long-term coexistence and mutual supervision until the practice was eventually codified. So what is it? How does it function?
I think it's different parties are allowed to exist in the same space, and they have interactions with each other in good faith that maybe allow the parties to maintain their own identity and their own the parties get to maintain themselves independently. But there's a little bit of transparency. There's a little bit of trust. There's a little bit of mutual vulnerability, which then allows them to at least work together. The CPC and the Kuomintang fought off the Japanese for most of the 1940s. And that kind of united front or long-term coexistence and mutual supervision was key in defeating the Japanese and Japanese imperialism.
Yeah, long-term coexistence and mutual supervision is the multi-party system in place in China in which the leadership of the Communist Party of China is augmented by the existence of other parties representing other class or political interests, but recognizing and supporting the effort of socialist construction. And this policy allows for groupings focused around specific non-antagonistic interests to be focused on by dedicated parties. These parties can then make advisory contributions to how the country should act in their area of focus. Meanwhile, the Communist Party itself is free to focus on the larger task of socialist construction, being able to leave the more specific interests in the hands of the minor parties. What are some benefits that this has to China's socialist construction?
I mean, it allows the different parties to focus on their own areas of expertise.
It's also just much easier and more resource efficient to not have to constantly be suppressing like class enemies, like in the Soviet Union in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Completely different material reality. They had to deal with Nazi Germany that they saw on the horizon and all this other stuff. But like they had to expend a lot of resources on making sure that the Nazis didn't win, or that, you know, class enemies within the Soviet Union did not allow the Nazis to do more damage than they ended up actually doing in history. So just imagine if they hadn't had to do all that, and if they were like, okay, look, you have your other parties, but we all got to be pushing in the same direction here. Just that would have been much more efficient and less kind of repressive and violent.
Yeah. Historically speaking, it would have been ridiculous if the CPC had rejected the parties that supported them during the Civil War. Then afterwards, the goal was to build unity and socialist construction, suddenly trying to eliminate the existence of the other parties that had already shown that they were willing to put their lives on the line for the cause of the people's democratic dictatorship and socialist construction, would have been unnecessarily harming that unity in a time in which the immediate task was to rebuild after the period of disunity caused by Jiang Ziexu's own attempted consolidation of power. Since the codification of the system of long-term coexistence and mutual supervision, the CPC has been able to observe its other benefits and has not experienced any disturbances from its existence, and so it has remained in place. China is a large country with many different people groups and economic relations. The system allows them all to have their interests represented without the antagonism and division that inevitably occurs under a bourgeois multi-party system. In this way, it prevents factionalism within the country. This also eliminates a source of potential factionalism within the Communist Party itself. If it were the sole political party with any say in governance, it would be the only avenue for those that wish to have direct involvement over how things are run. This could result in different groupings that are all clamoring to have their specific pet interests addressed, or worse, the formation of a fifth column within the party. In this system of long-term coexistence and mutual supervision, those that have specific pet interests can join a party for those interests, and potential fifth columnists are more likely to start their own party or join one whose specific interests might align closer with the potential fifth columnists. The mutual supervision and the requirement to promote socialist construction will then either keep them in line and in a position in which they cannot do harm, or at least allow for a much smoother purge of the fifth columnists if they decide to openly disrupt unity. Anything else on the long-term coexistence and mutual supervision? Yes. Final thoughts on this section. I just wanted to add just my own final thought. I think people have mentioned a few times, I've seen on the internet, and also just heard people mention, there are a lot of different leftist groups in the United States today. And it's possible that if we have a revolution, it might be a coalition of different parties or groups that work together to have this revolution. And in that scenario, we might have to have our own system of long-term coexistence and mutual supervision. So it is an interesting thing to study in that regard. Any other final thoughts on the section?
He cooked.
That he did.
I agree.
Yeah, I have not really read much Mao outside of this reading group, and I'm really enjoying it.
All right. We have ran out of time, and we don't really have much. We don't have any time at all to cover the next chapter that we were planning on covering tonight, but we will cover both of them together at the beginning of next reading group. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone.
Probably.
Good discussion today. Thank you.
Yeah.
До свидания.
Bye-bye. 再见.
再见.
Thank you for watching this recording of our reading group, and thank you to everyone that attended. We hope you got something out of this. This is the final video before our next reading group on November 11th, at which time we plan to discuss chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. If you enjoyed this video and want to attend a reading group live, feel free to reach out to us via email at milwaukee@cpusa.org, DM us on any of our social media pages, or come say hi at any event we're attending. Our reading groups are hybrid meetings with both in-person and virtual options, and we'd love to see more of the community attend in whatever form they can. Solidarity, everyone, and see you next time with Chapter 9 on the question of disturbances created by small numbers of people.